Were mostly developed, and so the higher densities, particularly quarter-acre lots, and then along major streets on east and west, kind of fills out the city, wouldn't necessarily be as significant of an impact. Somebody raised the question, well, what about homes that are already there? What about half-acre lots and people want to subdivide? And we just had the accessory building conversation, but they want to subdivide their land and do flag lots on half-acre lots or existing subdivisions. So what is the likelihood, I guess, that is even possible either through ordinance or size of lots and configurations, that sort of thing?
So depending on the part of the city you're looking at, and when we refer to one of the changes, as you mentioned, west of I-15 as the example, going from 2 to 4, and does that allow us to split our half acres to quarter acres? Again, this won't automatically change the zoning on any property, and so first off, every one would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Would go through the same process as anything that's under consideration now through public hearings and meetings, and the Planning Commission recommends it to the council, who then has discretion in their decision as to whether it makes sense. So certainly on a procedural level, that gives you the chance to look at it case by case. The bigger picture is what type of impact might you see. My feeling on the city west of the freeway is it's highly likely that there are big patches that are left, and there aren't too many of them, will be probably interested in pursuing higher densities. So that seems to makes sense. The developers are going to go and ask for it. But within existing neighborhoods, there would be few to little lots that likely would be able to do it based on the lot dimension. So just because, the example I gave even in Old Town Kaysville, just because you have half an acre, perhaps more, but if you have a narrow lot, you cannot subdivide that under our ordinances because of your frontage requirements. Many of the homes west of I-15, even though the city's operated under a 2-unit per acre with some higher density provision for decades, are under half an acre. So not many property owners actually have the full half acre to split it theoretically. A lot of those properties are 3rd acre, quarter-acre lots already. You think of some of our bigger subdivisions, Hill Farms, Mountain Vistas, Old Mill, Sunset Equestrian. Their lots are smaller because they've put some of that into open space areas. So, that's not the entirety of the city. Certainly there are larger properties that there would be some that if they came before the council and said, I'm looking to split. We saw one tonight. I've got a large lot. I've got the frontage. I had a half acre. I want to make 2 quarter acres. That could happen. Again, you'll get to look at it through the zone case by case. But I think there are far fewer lots than maybe is originally perceived on how many would really even be able to do it just on a practical basis before even the legislative process allows for the consideration.
Right, and not just through the rezoning process, which would be required for each application or each subdivision of a half-acre lot, but also setbacks, how wide all those ordinances come into play as well that would restrict many lots from being able to do that as well.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, I think the last question I have that hasn't already been addressed is the numbers on the higher densities on the west side, 200 north, and near the freeway and the future west highway, and then also on the east side where you can have up to 16 along major streets, 10 on the west side along major streets. So those numbers, I'm just a little concerned in a general plan. I'm wondering if the numbers are the best way to go, only because in one sense, it might be for those, and most of my neighbors in West Kaysville all agree they don't want higher densities, more traffic, all these different things. Although on the other hand, many people will say, well, I'd like my children to be able to live here. So if you put 16 as the number or 10, then do you just automatically always build to that maximum number, and you've got sort of a cap? Or on the one hand, you build up to that number, but you've got a cap to limit further growth. But it just seems maybe sort of arbitrary to put that much definition into the general plan. Would it be better maybe to have something like lower density, medium density, higher density, and then let the ordinance for each particular zone kind of control how many, because it already does, right? So would that be maybe a more appropriate thing to have in the general plan? Let the ordinances and also the zoning process control how much density goes in any particular place.
Certainly it would be appropriate to state it that way, so it would allow the council to make ultimately that decision and then defer to you. It's a general plan, so general language is great in the sense that you can interpret it in different ways and it helps you to apply it on a case-by-case basis. I would probably agree that you set a specific number there. That's what people are going to come asking for, and whether or not it's hard to say no to that and refine it from there, you've got experience in that and can determine that. The Planning Commission, the drafts that we put together, these were reflective of specific zoning districts, and that's why we came up with these numbers and what it might do. They did ask that we make it a little more open-ended in the event that maybe 10 was too little. What if somebody had 10.5 units per acre, and that was a fantastic thing for that section of town? Would they be limited to saying yes to that? Or what if 6 was appropriate, or even 3? And so they like the idea of opening it up a little bit more if we'd like to do it beyond what's suggested here. For the purposes of a general plan, that's absolutely appropriate. Just whatever you think gives the best guidance and direction moving forward. If you think future councils will understand what low, medium, or high means, that would certainly be appropriate.
Thank you.
I don't want to legislate on the fly here. So I have a question about, so we just need to pass three of these, right?
Correct.
By the 1st. Would it be possible for us to choose 3 to pass now and then revisit the others at a future time?
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic segue maybe into the consideration of the council. So again, something we talked about lots with the Planning Commission. Yeah, we don't have any reason to go above and beyond. I think the Planning Commission just felt there were certain things that they felt were ready, but the council certainly could cut it back to meet the 3. Mm-hmm. And we are, in 2020, we've received grant funding to help us go through a big general planning process where we'd have the chance to revisit this, further refine it, add more if at that time it becomes appropriate. So if there are items that maybe we're just not ready to do yet, that would be appropriate as well to limit.
Mayor?
Yes.
I think it might be appropriate if we could bring up that list of the recommendations and we
All
can
right,
decide.
and it is in our packet.
For everybody to look
So the ones that the Planning Commission chose were A, B, E, F, and L. And maybe council could look through those and choose the top 3. Choose your favorites.
Or the 23. We're not precluded to just
That's
pick
true.
what the commission's recommending to us.
Sure.
We'll
but we
choose.
wouldn't want to throw away all their work. But
I have a quick echo to your point, if you don't mind, Mayor, and I think it's relevant. You're asking, could we just do 3 now instead of all 5 and do the 2 later? Well, there's nothing compelling us to do 2 more. I mean, we're at the buffet. Let's not overeat, right? Let's not overtax everybody and just literally rip the city in half. I mean, I can't wait till we get to the comment section.
okay. All right.
Question on that.
Yes, please.
So we need to have 5
No.
added, but 3 by the end of the year.
Nope, 3 total.
3 total.
Correct. So I'm hearing the council stated correctly. The state has only asked us to implement 3. The commission has recommended 5.
Commission got hungry.
And you're welcome to do
Let's not be rude.
what you want with their recommendation, whether that's
Fantastic.
only 3 or a different 3, 20.
And one we already have in the
Yes,
right now.
correct.
Which is,
One more question.
yes,
It
Councilmember
just came
Doran.
up. So
Yeah.
so in this calculus, if we only do 3 and never do 5, is there another measure here? I mean, these AMI 80, 50, 30. So do we, is there an accountability? So do we just say at this point, and again, I don't understand SB 34 perfectly by any means, but do we have to then report how we are doing on moderate income housing with different numbers? So in other words, if the items we choose don't produce the result Is there accountability there as well?
So this has been a lot of discussion with the Planning Commission on exactly what that means, how specifically beholden are we going to be, are we going to have to track the real estate listings on every property and so forth to track those. My read on it is, well, first part, we do an annual reporting, so currently the city does actually a biannual report to the state on our existing moderate income housing plan, and it tracks how many permits we're issuing, what the average valuation of those homes are, and so forth. So we would continue to do something similar to that, and but would be more regular. What I would say is pretty specific about providing housing for those AMI points. I don't know if they're going to ask for the number that says, did you sell 6 or 100 houses in Kaysville that were 150,000, or did you follow your general plan and allow accessory dwelling units? And so I think if we pick the, just again going on that one, accessory dwelling unit, or maybe creating supporting infrastructure, and we could simply show examples. We've enacted an ordinance, whether somebody actually pursues that or not, I think the city will have done their portion of that. If we can show examples where we've supported infrastructure around some of our housing that qualifies as this, I think that could be sufficient. So that's my feeling on it. Again, the market's going to do a little bit of what's going to do, unless we choose the options where we're subsidizing developers and development to do things, which, based on the options provided, I think we simply need to show that we've taken what you gave us as a choice and we pursued them in some fashion or another. And
thank you. And I apologize. One more question that I had forgot from before. During the discussion in Planning Commission and in choosing these items, I noticed that several of the 23 have a price tag attached. So subsidizing, reducing impact fees, actually the city putting tax dollars to encourage, lower income people being able, or income affordability in Kaysville, or housing affordability in Kaysville. So it appears that those discussions, the direction that this is going is less a financial one and more of let's address it more with zoning rather than commit, rather than to throw money at it, for lack of a better way to say it, I guess. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I believe in some of the conversations we've had, they thought that was both on a management side for the personnel and the amount we have and dealing with some of those programs, but on a fiscal note and the way they see Kaysville operating, something that turned them off of considering those items.
Thank you.
All right. If it's acceptable to the council, I'd like to ask each council member if they would welcome doing 3, just choosing 3 and moving that along. And so I just want to get a feel before we make any motions. Councilmember Adams, would that be acceptable to you?
Oh, yeah, 3 out of the 23 collectively, yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, we're faced with the choice there.
And you? Yes?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes?
I have one comment with that.
Yes.
I think we do the 3, but I think there's still need for updating a lot of our zoning
Absolutely.
and things, and I think as long as we commit to do that as part of our general plan update.
That is part of what's going on next year. Absolutely. Councilmember Kerr, is that acceptable?
One quick question on this.
Yes.
So we are picking
Microphone.
we are picking from the. I'm sorry. We're picking from the 5 that have already been highlighted.
No, the menu of 23.
If you, I'm open.
Oh.
However you guys want to do this. If you want to choose 3 from the whole list, as long as you guys agree, that's all.
However, I would make one caveat to that, if I
Okay.
might. So this went through a process that I
Correct.
respect.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's my point.
And if we're picking from any of the 23, I would say that is much more legislating on the fly than changing a little bit of the wording.
Agreed.
Right.
So-
Agreed.
Nobody's saying we're doing it right now, Councilmember Gordon?
Yes, we are choosing 3.
Tonight, right now?
Tonight, right
Yeah, I'm a nay on that. I'm not
Okay.
doing that tonight.
Right, so it's limited to
First time
5.
I've seen it. So I want to make a quick comment so people are aware, like, if this council kind of dilutes down the 3 and appeases us all tonight, we don't do this whole quadruple expansion of the zoning, just stay tuned, it could come back and resurface next year.
All right. So, Councilmember Barber, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, it was just that, yes, we have the 3 that we could think about and propose, and we could still table it and come back next
Okay,
week.
that
and
would
look
be
at it. I think that
acceptable.
would be great.
I would entertain a motion to table it till the next council meeting.
I think we should get further along in the process and decide the 3 that we're proposing, so the community knows how to communicate with us about those 3.
Or along with,
I'll motion to table it, if that's what you're after. Absolutely. There's no way I'm voting on this tonight.
on the fly here with this.
Yeah.
Land use issues are way too important. Sorry. Land use issues are way too important to sit here and to select, 3 out of these 5 that have already been vetted and that have already been brought.
Well, not
before
only
us.
that, but we have this whole survey thing from the people.
Right,
That should
exactly.
maybe be taken into consideration.
So I would second
Agree.
Councilman Adams' motion of tabling this.
okay.
But we're still going to discuss it. Let's keep that in mind. Don't anybody get
Sure.
too anxious.
Okay.
We're going to
Yep.
get into this.
So it's been moved by Councilmember Adams, seconded by Councilmember DeCare to table. Comments to table?
So my comment would be, I think it'd be productive and a wise use of everyone's time who's already here to go through those 5 items, talk about what they mean, implications
Okay.
they have, not commit, but there needs to be a lot of ongoing communication between now and our next council meeting, so then
Sure.
we have a framework for that.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so we've got a motion to table, and let's go through the 5 that have been highlighted. A is rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate-income housing. I think this is probably one of the more contentious ones. Comments on A?
All right, I think unless you're getting into the subsidized housing, reducing impact fees, things like that you've got to have some zoning flexibility to address it, right? I mean, if you're going to pick, so A seems to be one that I would think you need to keep, even if you tweak it a little bit, the general plan.
A as proposed, absolutely not. Not with the quadrupling of doubling and, no. No.
Mayor? Councilmember Barber?
Quickly, if you don't mind, Michelle.
Go ahead.
Mayor, if you're going to go through these one at a time, I think that's great, but then I would like to reserve the right for just open-ended comment when you're done with that.
Absolutely.
Michelle asked for that. Is that what you're saying? Can we get the menu up on the screen, Lyle? Is that what you're asking for?
It's in the staff report. Yeah, there you go.
There's the menu.
Okay. All right, so
Zoom in, Lyle.
Councilmember Page, any thoughts on A?
Yeah, I actually agree with Councilmember Garn on this. I mean, if you're serious about attacking this problem at all, that this is probably the main one that you can do. So, but like I say, I don't like the idea of having numbers. So.
Councilmember Barber?
That was going to be my comment or question to Lyle. If we can keep this in and remove the actual specific numbers and just put in there a change to the density in the general plan.
Okay. How about you, Councilmember DeCare? Thoughts on A?
I think A needs to stay. And as we go through and we unpack all this, I think A is good. I do agree, though, with Councilwoman Barber, though. A general plan should just be that. It should be general. Inserting, numbers with, defined parameters and that, where residents and builders and people are going to come back to and say, oh, but wait, no, look, right here it says we can do this. That's never any good. So keeping it more general, stripping some of the verbiage out of that, I think is a way to move forward. But as far as letter A is concerned, I'm in support of that.
Okay. B is facilitate the rehabilitation or expansion of infrastructure that will encourage the construction of moderate-income housing. What would that look like? What would that be, Lyle?
Well, one of the things that the Planning Commission liked about B as an example, and there were some others that they considered, was facilitate is a very broad definition. So that could be through discussions, encouragement, participation, perhaps it's financial. It's very open-ended, so they liked how flexible that could be. Infrastructure that supports housing, essentially, is if we're improving roads, which we may be doing anyway, people build on those. So we could check off that, we made improvements to this road this year, and somebody's welcome to build next to it. Again, I think items like that could qualify and satisfy some of the verbiage of the language as it currently states. I don't know if the state will get harder in the future on how specific we get, but that, to me, in my recollection of the Planning Commission's conversation, is kind of why they liked that. They're likely things we're already doing with our utility services and streets, and the open-ended nature of the verbiage that's used on this.
Okay.
That's why I like it. We're already doing it, right? So, get
So
close.
I think B is a no-brainer because we've got the huge connector road, the connector roads down in West Kaysville coming. Angel's going to get connected to Shepherd, and I think we got B in the bag. And I'll echo what Councilwoman Barber already mentioned, folks, so maybe it didn't stand out when she mentioned it. We really only need 2 of these options because we already are doing one and not what I just mentioned. I think it's the active transportation plan, right? We just need to include that into this. So we already have that. So we're already compliant with one. We've got the Angel to Shepherd connection coming. That looks like B would fit in well with that. That's going to facilitate a lot of development surrounding that. So to me, it looks like we're down to needing one more option here.
Okay. Okay.
Do you know which one it is, Michelle? The active transportation plan. Which letter? What item on the menu is it in? Is it on the lunch menu? The dinner menu?
Of the items that the state's
The state calls it a menu, by the way.
the one we're currently discussing is the one we have. So the active transportation is additional to these 23 items as well. So
It was just
this is the one we already have in there that we're discussing.
Okay.
Also, B is
currently in our plan. And it's listed as number 5 in the page there. It's probably hard to tell if it's new or not based on the red line version, but number 5 is one that's currently in our moderate income plan.
Okay.
Can I just
Yes.
make one comment about, I don't know that we need to be stuck on the number 3. It just does it make sense or not? Evaluate each one based on the merits. And if you look at L, for example, how could you be against preserving existing moderate income housing? I mean, we, again, already got it. So if that's number 4, well, and the other thing is, I would just like to say, have quite a bit of feedback from people who are for E, right? So I would like to put in a vote for E,
Okay.
which is to create or allow for and reduce regulations related to accessory dwelling units in residential zones.
Okay.
Are we on E yet, or are we still on B?
We talked about B, and so it feels like there's a lot of support for B. Let's go to E. Councilmember Adams, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm totally fond about E without
This is
a lot
accessory
more public.
dwelling
Yeah, I
units.
get it. This is accessory, well, it's also duplexes. We've heard that it could be opened up to, and I don't even know if we've heard a regulation on how many accessory buildings you can put in your backyard. So at this point, absolutely not.
Councilmember Page.
Yeah, on number E, we need to be careful on this. You got to understand, Salt Lake has been working on this for 4 years, just on this issue, actively every single year. So
That's how they claim they're in compliance. We're working on it. We're working on it.
It's really complicated. And I think that this would be the one, if it is approved, I think we take it slow and see the problems that other cities have and don't make the same mistakes.
I'd like to quickly just echo to my comment as well, though, to just clarify for the people, I'm not necessarily trying to discriminate against anything of that nature. What I'm trying to look out for is the explosion of growth and the lack of infrastructure being able to handle it. So it's not necessarily that I want to tell you you can't do that in your backyard, but you got to hold on, because we might not be able to handle you doing that. So,
Yeah. Councilmember
I
Garden.
guess the only thing I would say about, in defense of E, is we're talking about the general plan right now, so with perhaps more than one, but particularly this one, would have to have ordinances built around it before it could be allowed, and that's where you would put in more detail as to what your expectation is. But if you don't allow for it in your general plan, it essentially means that you're saying no to any type of accessory dwelling structure.
Any thoughts on E, Councilmember Barber?
I am appreciative of all the interest that we've had around the city, but I think we need to be very cautious. I would be uncomfortable putting it even in the general plan without the ordinances around it, and I would assume we can do them at the same time, update the ordinances and the general plan
Yeah.
during the whole process in 2020. So that's where I feel.
Councilmember DeCare, thoughts on E?
Flat out, no.
Okay. F. F is allow for higher density or moderate income residential development in commercial and mixed-use commercial centers or employment centers. Let's start with Councilmember DeCare. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think by and large, Kaysville is a bedroom community. I mean, I think that that's something that that's been established for years and years and years. And I mean, how much commercial, mixed use, commercial center, employment centers, I mean, are we going to put moderate income housing over at the business park over there? I mean, I don't see exactly how this works. I mean, I get it. I mean, the planning commission vetted it. I got it and stuff. But, I mean, a mixed-use zone, I think. I mean, the 25 acres that's south of Boondocks, you know, I mean, maybe we had an opportunity to do something there where we mix in, you know, retail and put, you know, loft-style condominiums above it, you know, shopping below, something like that maybe. But, I mean, we just don't have any of the areas left anymore to do anything like this with, so not real crazy about it, but, you know, so.
That's all right. Councilmember Barber, any thoughts on F?
When I was listening to Planning Commission, the times that they listened to this, there was a lot of other options that we had. You know, we do have some residential or business areas in the city that could be accommodating to higher density or mixed-use zones. So I don't think we should just completely dismiss it. I think it's possible. I think we can also agree we're not going to suddenly turn into, you know, somewhere like Centerville that has a lot of these options throughout the city, or Farmington. So I think it's worth still considering. I still think we have opportunities for it.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Garden?
Yeah, I think, maybe this is more of a general comment, but I think, you know, we are a little bit taking too much. I think the concerns that we may be changing the complexion of Kaysville forever by making these changes, I just simply don't believe. I mean, we certainly continue to have zoning. You know, every rezone has to be approved by the Planning Commission and the council, who are, you know, accountable to the people. We have public hearings on everything. I would like to think that our future council and future councils for many years to come would represent the interests of their constituency for the most part. Not everyone agrees on every issue, but that we would have good governance in the future, making good decisions. Plus, we are probably, maybe arguably, just in terms of population alone, if you looked at that, maybe 75% of what the max population will be in Kaysville. And the nature and character of Kaysville, and I'll speak not because there's been some, I just want to go on record of being a little different. You know, I see I'm the only one on the accessory building thing who strongly favors that, but maybe that's because I have adult children. who sometimes come back home, and I have aging parents, still two left, one from my wife and one from another. And I'm kind of thinking, what business is it of my neighbor to say, I can't put a small structure without a driveway in my backyard that's reasonable, that goes through the process, and have my family come and stay nearby. So I'm a property rights person, number one, and number two, some of this mixed use will improve the community. So forgetting about what the state prescribes us to do, a little bit of diversity in housing and diversity in age groups and diversity in incomes is a good thing. It makes communities healthy. And there's a lot of studies to suggest that. So I'm not looking, I don't want a high-rise apartment right next to my house either, but I really sincerely doubt that that's what's going to occur in Kaysville. So I do think we may be overblowing a little bit the gravity of these changes, changing the soul of Kaysville.
Did you ever foresee Smiths being your neighbor, Councilmember Graham?
Anyway, I do want to say...
There's a point to that. Like those high-rise apartments will come. He never foresaw Smiths being his neighbor. He's the neighbor to the new Smiths. He's right on their property line. I doubt he foresaw that. I'm just saying, what we don't see today will be here tomorrow.
Mayor, if it's okay,
Of course.
I can answer that question.
Yeah.
So, I did...
Rhetorical.
Sorry.
Doesn't need an answer.
Oh, yeah.
I'll allow him to answer.
Okay. So back in 2002, when the considerations first started Smiths, I was very concerned because it was right next to my house, and I did get very involved at that point and spoke before the Planning Commission and the City Council, and I was very concerned. But the more I studied that, even as a citizen, I recognized, number one, that services were needed on the west side. I think this is a little bit different than apartment complexes, that we needed some shopping, we needed some ability not for all the growth on the west side. You talk about infrastructure, it's not just roads, public roads, it's also private infrastructure, like a place to shop, like a place to get gas or get some food. And to always have to run across the freeway, that's not good traffic planning, number one. I can walk to the store. It hasn't been as disruptive as what I thought it might be. I doubt if it's reduced my property values. I can sometimes walk with my children to the Smiths, where I used to, and I love Bowman's, I still go there sometimes, quite a bit actually, for different things, shop differently.
Can we rein this in just a little bit?
I would prefer if you would allow me to run the meeting. Thank you. All right.
So, yeah, I came around, and also the location. So it's 200 North, it's along major streets. It is also right next to my house, but 200 North and Flint Street. Where else are you going to put it in West Kaysville, except on major streets? So I just think as a community grows, and I get it, I'm sorry, but I just, one more personal privilege, if I may. I grew up in Utah and Salt Lake, but I've been in Kaysville for 35 years. My dad had a cabin up near Midway in Lime Canyon. And I used to catch snakes, and it was beautiful, and take my Labrador retrievers up there. I loved it. It was my favorite place on earth. Now it has that whole canyon right up. There's still a few cabins up higher, but it's all $1 million housing. I mean, they're beautiful houses, but I have to admit, nostalgically, but it's mainly my memories, but nostalgically, that's really changed. But now people live there, and they raise their families there. And Kaysville is not the same community that it was even when I first moved here 35 years ago. It's changed a lot. And we have to, and no one person, or a council or anyone controls that growth. It's all along the Wasatch Front. The limits to growth are water mainly, and even more than transportation, even more than land, will be water. And we will face some really serious challenges in the future as we continue to grow and have to make some tough choices. But we don't control that growth, and all we can do is plan for it the best we can. The infrastructure questions, the safety, traffic questions, those are all excellent questions that have to be addressed. But I don't know what that really has to do with a healthy community that has a mix of age groups and that considers, still a very well-to-do community, highly educated, very low crime compared to anywhere else. I don't think we sacrifice that by having a small amount of diversity in our housing.
All right, thank you. I do want to kind of weigh in on this for the mere fact. I really like the idea of limited mixed use in our community. I would love to see have the idea of allowing loft apartments along Main Street. I think that would be really fun and just offer some difference of housing. And anyway, I like the idea of mixed use, so if done appropriately. And then we already kind of talked about preserve existing moderate income housing, because who's going to get rid of that? So, yes.
Be careful.
All right.
I'm one of the guys that's got rid of them before a lot. I think the only thing is you got to give that a wide berth, because what you're saying is, if you go strictly by what they're saying, I mean, say there's an older home that's 120 years old, and it's, I mean, if it's, I really believe in preserving these kind of things, but if it's just completely run down and not worth saving, and you tear it down, and the value of it's only, say, $150,000 to give it a shape. What, you can only build a $150,000 house on it? So I guess I think that you're okay there, but you need to be careful to put some parameters in the ordinances of it to make sure that we stick with that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Katie, did you have a comment on that? Oh, I thought you were.
All right. Okay, and so I think we've had a generalized discussion on these 5. We do have a motion and a second to table it to the next council.
Can I make a comment too?
Yes.
In general in nature.
Yes.
We already discussed there would be open comment.
Yep, we did. So let's go around and make comments. Councilmember Page first.
Okay, let me just mention this. I'll keep this short. This stuff is old for me because I'm in community development in here, and that's what I do. And I've been to so many of these meetings, and we've actually, the legislature of the state level have been talking about this since I've been in 4 years. And can I just let's face reality, all right? This is a test for cities, what they just passed. You got to understand the makeup of our state legislature. The majority of the people serving in the state legislature come from 3 areas: realtors, developers, and contractors. That's the reality, all right? I think that this compromise, they're waiting to see what cities are willing to do. And I think the next shoe is, and there was several pushing for this, that frankly, they would love to take this over and mandate and choose and take that ability of local city councils to actually make those decisions. Many states have already started this process. The latest was California, and we know California does a lot of weird stuff. But I guess the whole point of it is they're mandated by the federal government, and now they're mandating us. And, they're on the line as well, because if they don't perform, which is the local cities, then they lose money. So it's one of those issues. It's a tough issue for people. I think that we need to understand that there is a problem, and Kaysville is facing it. I don't know if you know it, people, but we do not have affordable housing in Kaysville. And in fact, if we went out to this audience today, I was reading an article just several days ago, and I think it applies to us. But they said in cities like ours, 70% of the citizens could not afford the house they live in if they had to reapply for it right now. Amen. Easy. It's that way. So I think we need to be sensitive to not only the new generations coming up and ways of looking at it and making it, because I think that's you know, I have a daughter that she moved to Layton because she never had the option in Kaysville. And so I think that this is a good step. We need to be careful. Growth is coming no matter what we do, but let's see what we can do to make it the best we possibly can to not only protect our values, but to make sure that we provide opportunities for the newer people and the younger generation coming up. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, short, generalized comments, 3 minutes or less.
No, we're not doing that. No,
Yes, we are.
No, you let Councilmember Garn run on. No, we're not. Just as you moved to me.
I don't think that's your decision.
I'm just looking at the time. Let's go with 3 minutes and let's see how you do. Since we've decided to table this anyway, we're going to have more discussion next time, right?
Start that just now.
Everybody's had a really good discussion, and
You didn't set that rule before you opened it up for comment.
would you like your 3 minutes or would you not? Let's get on with this. I don't want this to turn into a 20-minute diatribe, all right?
But we,
Go ahead.
Lyle, changing from half acre, 2 lots to the acre to quarter lots to the acre, okay, that would change the frontages, right? It would change the frontage requirements. So if somebody has a half acre lot that right now maybe doesn't have the adequate frontage to be able to split it off, well, when they change over to a quarter acre zoning or ordinance, their frontage shrinks. So maybe they do have enough frontage to split that off. You're going to see a lot of people cutting the roads up, putting sewers and waters in, cutting their side yards off, and I mean, at what point does this unraveling twine stop unraveling? Now, I have a different view on Senate Bill 34. I don't think it's a predatory action by the House, by the Capitol. I don't think they're looking to see what we're going to do and then maybe reward us or not reward us or penalize us or put punitive damages on us if we don't pick the items off the menu that they maybe don't want us to pick. Yes, most of them are developers. The leaders of the two legislative bodies are developers. And so that causes me concern. But I like the fact that the two that sponsored this bill put several different things in here. I find it shocking, quite frankly, that our planning commission, I'm not trying to harm them in any way, shape, or form, but I find it shocking that they're okay with choosing the most horrific end of the scale here. And I hope that the strategy here is not to shoot for the stars and hope that you get the moon. I'm hoping that we're not really trying to just go to 3 to the acre or whatever it is and shoot so far over that we all kind of settle down in the middle. But I mean, in here you got several options that you can choose from. Apply for a partner with an entity that applies for state or federal funds or tax incentives to promote the construction of moderate income housing. And you got like 3, 4, 5 options like that at the end of the menu where we just have to apply and start progressively looking, partnering with other strategic entities on how we can start solving some of these problems or creating some new avenues. We don't have to go to 16 to the acre, 10 to the acre, 4 to the acre. We don't have to. We already have the R1LD zone out in West Kaysville that allows people to do quite a bit of flexibility. I don't think we're really going to solve the problem here in Kaysville. My father has a sign in his office by Will Rogers, and it says, buy land, because they ain't making any more of this stuff. And we're running out quickly, which means that the demand is there's so much pressure because the supply is so low. I don't think that I love the idea of having my kids live here, but I don't think that we can really solve those problems. And I also love the idea of maybe not having my kids live here. Maybe that would help solve some of Kaysville's problems. If we could break up this long, anyway, I won't go off on that, but...
I'm sure you love your children.
I hope they leave the state of Utah, but I'll stay out of my personal realm. Anyway, I think we ought to leave it alone as far as the zoning is concerned. I mean, why don't we choose option O? This one's interesting. and this one I'd really like to question the sponsors of the bill on, implement a mortgage assistance program for employees of the municipality or of an employer that provides contracted services to the municipality. That one boggles my mind. So now we're going to, I wonder how many cities are going to choose that one. So really, who wrote this bill? I'm kind of calling them out. Like, we're going to start subsidizing government employees' mortgages. That's an option in SB 34 to comply. I don't understand that. Why aren't we saying, why isn't it an option that says institute a mortgage subsidy program for people who qualify in your community? You know, help them. And if it happens to be a city employee, great. If it happens not to be, great. But there are so many options in here, folks. I'm appalled and shocked that we are looking, even considering exploding the growth at these rates. Now, we already have in the general plan provisions that say we allow some higher density along major streets. As I've sat here for 4 years, I've questioned many of things that have already been passed, whether they really are along major streets. And the key word in there is some higher density. I've seen that go as high as 9 or 10 to the acre. In the wording, I'm concluding, all right? This is in the wording right now of what the rezoning wording states. I believe, Lyle, does it use the word near major streets? Do you mind checking that on the 10 and 16 on the west side? What is
It's
say along or near?
along, so it maintains the same language, so up to 10 units per acre along major streets under paragraph A1. So that has not been proposed to change. But there is also language I'm here from the audience, so along major streets, further on it says near 200 north and I-15, so both.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is the 16 units per acre on 200 north, it uses the word near. What's near? What's along a major street? I've seen this get extended and exaggerated out. Downtown, we have some apartments. I happen to like the loft idea, like what Layton has done. Downtown, we have some apartments that are pretty old. There are several options in here, and I hope you guys go home and review this too, to where we could help maybe couple up with the owners of that and rehabilitate that. And I would say before we just do this big blanket zoning, and I'm sorry, I represent everyone. I understand that, folks. But if we were to break us up in districts, I'm really the west side, and I'm going to speak loudly for the west side here, and equally for you guys on the east. I think 16 all across your board is too much. But to go up to 4 to the acre out there, you're ripping things in half. To just put these blanket policies out and to go to 10 and 16 on 200 north and 4 to the acre. What I'm proposing is that we look at other options to where we help facilitate some of these things, whether it be financially or not. And we've already got one item that we're kind of knocking out of the park. We've got 2 more to go. I don't think we have to go to such an extreme measure. And perhaps we designate some areas in town that we could help facilitate, and we say, okay, well, we're gonna start working on it here. I really don't think the legislature is saying, hey, rip your communities apart.
All right, thank you. All right, general comments on this. Councilmember Barber?
I agree. I'm really glad we're getting rid of the actual numbers in the zoning. I think that I kept looking for the data that backed those up, and I know we have a little bit with the income-based, but it really made me uncomfortable. So I'm glad we're getting away from that, but the other part that's made me uncomfortable with this discussion is I feel like there's twofold things that we need to do. Number one, we need to make sure that we are in compliance with Senate Bill 34. Because one comment I was going to make is we've been at lots of meetings with League of Cities and Towns. They're very much talking about taking the C road money away from us, which would be detrimental for sure. So I want to be in compliance, but I want to make a commitment to our community that we are looking to bring different types of housing in, but we're also going to accommodate for it. We kind of skipped over the one about infrastructure. Yes, we can check that box, but I think we need to be really careful to make sure we do have infrastructure that can support all of these types of developments beyond just making sure we're in compliance with the law. So, or with the Senate bill, sorry. I would put with this just a commitment that this general plan update is where that needs to happen. And I think everyone in this room and that's paying attention needs to stay involved in this process. I'm glad we're getting this part out of the way and being compliant, but there's much more, I think, to be done here. So I'll leave it with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember DeCare? All right. Great.
Did I already make my general comment? I think I was just responding to
Okay.
Councilman
I will
Adams.
give you 3 minutes.
3 minutes, thank you. Yeah, I just want to be a third witness to legislature's intent, and we've seen it in a number of ways where when a city, and sometimes it takes only one city or a number of cities that don't quite go in the direction and some of them probably are a little bit extreme in what they're doing, but they will go beyond that, and that gets the legislature's attention. And so I add third witness, they're very much watching what cities are doing, and they will take further action if they need to. I don't agree with that part. The fact that I said that I think some of these changes would be good for Kaysville doesn't mean that I agree with the state's heavy-handedness, although we are creatures of the state. Municipalities aren't sovereign. They are subdivisions of the state. However, it's certainly wisdom to let each community decide for itself its culture and soul, or whatever you want to say there, the ambiance of a community, and the particular needs depending on the size and the culture and everything of the city. Those decisions should be made as locally as possible, and I do find it a little bit ironic and troubling that the state, which I very much agree, resists federal intrusion and unfunded mandates strongly, and I agree with that. But then they turn around and dictate to the communities, and I don't agree with that. So I think we would have been just fine making these decisions on our own without being mandated from the state, but it is what it is, and they certainly have the right to do it. Whether it's smart to do it or not is another question.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Page?
I think I've already did mine.
Okay. All right. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to table the item. We've had comments, so we're going to go to a vote. Councilmember Page?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. All right. Okay, we're going to move on to our work items, and first thing we're going to have is a presentation by our city manager.
Mayor Jordan Stevenson was supposed to be here from the TAC committee tonight to make this presentation, and he asked me to read a letter that he put together in conjunction with other TAC members. It says, Mayor and City Council members, it was recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee in conjunction with many other residents interested in this project that we gather data from each household before approving the project and also to allow residents not wanting Kaysville Fiber to opt out completely. Before we outline the results of the Kaysville Fiber survey and opt-out process, we'd like first to express appreciation of the dozens of volunteer citizens who have gone throughout the city to ensure that every resident was aware of the fiber project. And especially we mention appreciation to the city staff who handled the paper submissions throughout the month. Special thanks to Ryan Jett and Jordan Hansen for their extra efforts in compiling and logging all the responses. In addition, we'd like to outline the numerous efforts by the city and residents to inform each household about the choice taking place over this past month. The city reached out in the following ways. They mailed a survey to every residential utility address at the end of September and again to non-respondents at the end of October. Multiple posts on official Kaysville City social media accounts and websites, sent a reminder postcard to all non-respondents, sent out email reminders, sent a phone call to non-respondents, and held a Q&A meetings every Monday night in October at the fire station. In addition, resident groups also reached out in at least the following ways: put a door hanger on every residential door in Kaysville, nearly daily posts and conversations on social media reaching thousands of residents, advertisements in the candidate edition of the Davis Clipper, several news articles on KSL, Salt Lake Tribune, and Fox 13 News, and many neighborhood meetings and personal conversations. These efforts resulted in over 5,086 surveys that were returned, which represents 56.4% of all residential accounts in the city. Of the 56.4% that were returned, 31.5% opted in by completing the survey, and 24.9% opted out. And those numbers, those 31.5% and the 24.9% reflect a percentage of overall customers. For those who are interested in Kaysville Fiber, 68.6% indicated they want Kaysville Fiber as soon as possible, and 67.8% wanted 250 megabit service or higher. Included in the submissions were many comments. Those excited about fiber coming to all neighborhoods in Kaysville expressed appreciation for the efforts in this project. Others expressed concern that this project was not put to the citizens' vote on the ballot, and expressed other concerns as well. We also had some who submitted an opt-out form but asked to be able to join the Kaysville Fiber before construction and not incur any financial penalty. Based on these results, the TAC committee would like to recommend a $20 fiber utility fee and a $3,000 lump sum option. We, the TAC committee, appreciate the City Council's support in conducting the survey and believe that the information provided will be invaluable in discussing the next steps on the project, including in the next agenda item. We look forward to your direction to the city staff and the Technical Advisory Committee moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to take a minute and review the past basically 2 years that we've been discussing this, and there has never been as much public engagement on any project ever in the city of Kaysville. We have had open houses, we've had information sessions, we've had newsletter articles, we've had podcasts, we've had door hangers, we've had people going door to door, we've had mailers, and we have had, and I think it shows in the response rate that we got in the survey, also surveys, multiple surveys that we've had. When we started looking at this, my intent was that what we were doing was creating something specific to Kaysville, something that could bring us together. That has hit a bit of a rocky patch. It's been very well vetted. This idea has been very well vetted by our community, and the pros and the cons and the what ifs and how about that, and I am so proud of this community for taking this issue and really putting it through its paces. What about this? What about that? I am very encouraged by the results of our survey, and it shows a broad base of support for fiber in Kaysville. But I feel that it is more important that we have a real strong community buy-in in this, and I think that the results of the survey do show that there is some buy-in, but I would recommend to the council that we repeal the fiber utility and that we ask for a citizen initiative for fiber here in Kaysville. Because I feel that I want fiber for our community, but more important than that is I want us to come together. So I want it done right, not right now. And so I would recommend to the council, it's not my decision because I don't vote, but I'm recommending to the council that we also put Light Hub interlocal agreement to the side for the time being and have a clean slate. And let's come together and figure out what we can do together. All right. I want to go and generalize discussion on fiber, and I should say lightning fast internet, because I had one of our youth council members ask me earlier today. He said, "What is fiber?" And it is lightning fast internet. So generalized comments at this time about the direction. I'd first like to, I want to acknowledge our technical advisory committee, who has been working on this for nearly 2 years. And those members are Andre Lortz, Brett Tarbox, Jordan Stevenson, Ryan Judd, Dean Story, Shane Scott, and Michelle Barber, and Councilmember DeCare, and myself. So our technical advisory committee has done hours and hours and hours and hours of work on this. I also want to acknowledge the work of...
Just so you know, Mayor, we're well past the 3-minute mark.
Thank you. I also want to acknowledge the hard work of those who went door to door to get signatures for a referendum. If the council accepts my suggestion, that would acknowledge that. And I also want to give a big shout out to the folks from both sides who took the time to talk to their friends and neighbors to bring them into this discussion. So that is what I wanted to say at the outset. So that would be my recommendation, and I would like to hear what the council would like to see going forward. Councilmember Adams.
I, for one, am shocked. And speaking of diatribes, I'm shocked. The amount of hell that you've put this community through, and you have spearheaded this, you have pushed this. I'd like to ask you, as your congressional campaign manager urged you to take a passive approach to this.
Point of order.
Thank you.
This is not germane.
Yeah, we've turned this city into a civil war over this. And now you're trying to spearhead a complete turnaround when you do an about-face in July after you promised that this would be on the ballot?
Yes.
I will make a motion to remove Councilmember Adams from the meeting unless he stays on point and stops personal attacks. Is there a second?
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not the...
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Carry on.
I think there needs to be more explanation than what's going on here. This city has been ripped over this. It has gone back and forth, promises made. Did you just shrug that off?
I would like to know, what we're trying to do
I do
is
have peripheral vision.
we do. What I would like to do is to bring us together, and I would like to know what your proposal would be moving forward, instead of talking about questioning
That's not part
motives.
of it. You're
What
off
would you
topic.
like to
That's
do?
not part of it. It does not say come prepared with a proposal
Private
to move forward.
timeline discussion. What would you like to see happen, Councilmember Adams? Go for it.
Mayor, that's out of the scope of what we're talking about right now. It does not say come prepared with that. So I thank you for that joust. But you could go back into 2018 and review council meetings where what I asked if we were going to turn this into a utility, into a mandated project. And I was told by you guys, absolutely not. This will be subscriber-based only. No way would we consider forcing this. Yeah, I can go pull those videos. So now we've gone to promising it be on the ballot, then it's stripped from the ballot in the very next meeting after $200,000 was approved to prepare it for the ballot. Okay, and that's what you guys approved the money for specifically, was $200,000 to prepare the measure for this year's ballot. And had you guys have done that, you know what? You likely would have been successful. That's the biggest mistake you made, bar none. Amongst all the other misleadings, intentional or not, that's the biggest mistake right there. That never should have been stripped. That's the core right. And it's such a big project to create a whole new utility in the town. You shouldn't do it amongst just 5 people, on the shoulders of just a council. It should have been everyone involved with that. But $200,000 was approved to prepare it specifically for the ballot. And then 2 weeks later, you come back and you tell us we're taking it off the ballot. and you spend that money to do the direct inverse of what you said you were going to do with it. I'm speaking to all of you, not just you, Mayor. And there's no accountability, no answering for that. Nobody came back and said, hey, we need to return this $200,000. We need to give it back because we're shifting gears now. And then we need to reapply for it because we need to go do this, and this. We are now taking it off the ballot. We're now shifting gears. You promised the people that you were using that money to prepare for the ballot. You said it was for legal. You said it was for educational purposes and for some project management to prepare it for the ballot. I felt it was extremely expensive to spend $200,000 on that major. I voted no because of the dollar amount, but I didn't vote no because of the direction. I felt that was a great direction to go. I just disagreed with your dollar amounts that you approved for it. But then 2 weeks later, it came back, and the money wasn't spent to do that, and it was taken off the ballot. I appreciate the measures being taken. I appreciate the new direction. I appreciate the, there's some collaboration happening. It's sad to see what a war it took to get here. All people were asking for in the beginning was to just please listen, honor your promises, honor your word. I mean, really, the hole in the foot was shot by yourselves, by breaking that promise of not letting it go to the ballot. So it's great to see that now we're trying to collaborate, now we're trying to bring this back together. And maybe separating ourselves from Light Hub. I appreciate that. I've heard talks of some of these scenarios, and I think there's a good direction to go. I mean, because I ultimately, though, and I'll conclude, I ultimately would like to see the results. The newspaper just did another study on how Hill Air Force Base is moving into 5G, a huge 5G environment. I'd like to see the conclusive studies on the Salt Lake City. Salt Lake is 1 out of 5 cities throughout the nation that was selected by Verizon Wireless to do a 5G implementation project, and they're doing that right now. I'd like to wait and see the results of that, see the results of what Hill is doing. I just think that this is such a huge project. I don't necessarily think, there's a lot of confusion about who stands where. I'm not saying that fiber is not a great medium to transmit data. I've never said that. Of course it is. It's a great medium to transmit data. But is it the most economical medium for us? Is it over the life of the bond, the 30-year bond, is it really the greatest medium economically for us to go with? Is a spider web of fiber to every individual home and every individual office, tearing all that up, versus perhaps trunk lines to wireless towers in tomorrow's technology and feeding it wirelessly. Now I get, maybe you won't have an Ethernet all the way to your computer. Maybe you could take care of, maybe those who really, really need that, 10 gigabytes speed, for whatever reason they need it for, maybe they could go out on their own and have to deal with that with the incumbent providers on their own. But to impose that upon everybody and the amount of calamity that has come from this, another about face.
Thank you. All right, let's talk about the way forward. Councilmember Barber.
Well, before we get to that, I wanted to address, where we're at today. Mm-hmm. Where we're at today is a much better position than we would have ever been to before. And a lot of that comes from those people that were highlighted, both who are highly in support of the project, those who have opposed different pieces of it, and those that have just not known where to look and not known really, I don't want to say which side to believe because I don't think there's sides, but not know what choice to make for themselves. That was the biggest opportunity that we've taken, is putting this education together. And there was a much more to that decision. We had technical assistance, we had project management, legal, that it would still go forward. It was a good investment. But we're in a much better place, I believe that. And I want to publicly thank those who have reached out with differing opinions, and we've had come a lot further than we ever would have otherwise. And I apologize. I have talked to a lot of people. I will never say this has been a perfect process, but I will say it's always been with the intent to do the best thing for our city. And it's sure taken a long road to get there, and that's okay. That's totally fine. I'm going to own every piece of the behind the scenes that you've all been privy to, and taking the opportunity to be as open and transparent about what we're doing as possible, and a commitment that that's probably what you're going to see in the future. Because if you want to be involved, you kind of have to come along for the ride and see all the ups and the downs and the turns and the new information, and that's what's going to happen. And I really appreciate the comment at the beginning showing that's the type of governance I would look for, is someone willing to change their mind and come with a better solution and not stick with the first thing proposed, whether it was right or wrong. So I appreciate that. As far as not just the survey results, but really when I go around the city and people are talking about this project, for good or for bad, whatever their opinion is, I'm just glad they have one. I'm glad they know about it. I'm glad they're willing to come talk to me or talk to their neighbor about it. And that needs to continue, because this has to be even more of a unifying opportunity in the city. It can't just come from the council. One of the things that we learned is, if we put this on the ballot immediately, the city has to be very quiet and not continue to engage like we had been doing. And I'm glad we had that opportunity, and I'm glad now we can look to residents to take that over and community to support themselves. I think that's going to be the best thing that will come out of this.
Thank you. Comments? Councilmember Garn.
Yeah, so where we're headed is part of it. I think, the more research I do, I just saw something today on nonprofit organization that is not fiber, but is just for World Organization, is just for the high-speed internet and the future data needs. And I think that's a good place to start. Sometimes, and it's probably a fair criticism, we get so much into the weeds that you get lost, and even I, certainly get confused being in the mix of it and everything with all the different details and questions and doubts and different things. But the bottom line is the future for education, for health, for so many different things demands big data and decisions that are made by corporations, small businesses, people, and the ability to have symmetrical service to upload. That's really is very important infrastructure. So I don't think too many people doubt that, although the two areas where there's differences are, well, maybe there's some other technology that's going to come and replace it. So we don't want to bond because these other technologies are going to replace it. Or the private sector will eventually bring this technology to Kaysville anyway, so all we have to do is wait and not get the government involved. So those seem to be two of the biggest concerns. I'm even more convinced now, the more I've read and researched and listened, that number one, fiber to the home and 5G, which will eventually come too as a technology, are two complementary technologies. They don't replace each other, and so fiber to the home is not going to become obsolete in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, because the bandwidth capacity of fiber will not be outmoded. And in fact, the limiting factor is the receiver and sender and those will continue to improve. And once you have it in the ground, most of the cost is already there. I'm convinced that, what does that mean to us as far as cost? That at every level of service, whatever you choose, prices will go down, and on average, and you can pick a number, but we estimate a lot. In insurance, we're always picking estimates. We have actuaries to pick estimates. So this may not be an exact number, but in the aggregate, saves, just like the electric fund over private sector rate regulated power company, will probably save Kaysville residents in the aggregate $180,000 a month. And that's after the infrastructure fee. So I support it just even more strongly now than at the beginning of this process. Having said that, what my hope was in having a utility where we share it and everybody shares in the benefit and the cost was that this simple message of lower cost, very low risk because of the utility model, and improved service would, and I think the survey shows that at least a majority in that 57% sample, which is a huge sample, and who knows about the other 43%, but I'm sure it would track pretty, but a majority of people feel the same way. However, minority opinions are important too. And I have to admit at this point, we're not at a point where we had enough support really to go forward with just doing it as a council. So at this point, it makes more sense to make the referendum go away, repeal what we have, put it as an initiative next year for an election, and just have hopefully, even more messaging from private groups as well who want this, who will hopefully work hard to show the benefits that it has for the whole of not going forward with a council-only decision, repealing what we have, and putting it to an initiative next year.
Thank you. Any other, Councilmember DeCare?
Yeah, just real quick. So, as someone that works in technology, I'm a network engineer for the Utah Education Network, and what we've done is on a statewide level, where we've reached every corner of the state. And it took us 25 years to get there. And, so talk about something that's slow and methodical, and you want to make sure you do it right. That's very, very important. Having been on the Technical Advisory Committee for the past nearly 2 years, and watching this whole process evolve over those 2 years, I don't think I'm being disingenuous to say that, yes, my opinions and my mind has changed a lot on this over those 18 months. And I know this industry firsthand. I deal with it on a daily basis. But, the nuts and bolts with it and how we actually get there financially and make this work, that's a whole nother side of this coin, without question. So, in support of that, I'm not saying that everything is for naught here and that, but to echo Councilman Garn and the mayor, I think that, repealing what we've done and putting it before the 17,000 registered voters of Kaysville, hopefully more than 30% of them show up, but, get their take on things and move forward from there. So I think that's essentially where I'm at in this whole process as well.
Thank you. Yes.
You notice I'm one of the few that don't have a mic. I have to keep borrowing. Hey, just, I agree what's being said here tonight. When I talk to a lot of different people in this process, when people said, well, I opted out, I asked them why. I said, what's the reason for it? And I think there was a lot of legitimate reasons why they have. Some just don't want government involved. Some had great service with Comcast, and they didn't want to change that. So they didn't feel like they should be obligated to pay for other people's internet that do not have the service in Kaysville. And that's legitimate. But the majority that chose not to participate, or a lot of them opt out, they just didn't like the way it was presented, to be honest with you. To them, a lot of them, it was confusing. They weren't convinced, and to be honest with you, I think they needed more time to simulate it and everything else. And I think I personally feel that we're going to do a lot better by waiting and allowing this process to go forward. I hope you guys know 57% is incredible. The last election, we have the people that won back here. 33%, that's who voted. That's a big difference. And when you consider, too, that these are households that voted, and I would say, if I don't know how scientific this is, it's probably about 1.5 people per household, probably on the average, that made a decision to either opt in or opt out. So that's an incredible thing. So I think that the process, even though it's been messy, I think in the long run it's going to be good for Kaysville, and I think that it'll bring more people out to make that decision, and I look forward to that process.
All right. So, yes, Councilmember Barber.
One more thing I wanted to, I guess it's a commitment, really, especially going forward. One thing that we will be able to do that we've learned and we come together on this process is put together a well-packaged plan that is all-encompassing of the project. And a lot of those pieces took a long time to come together up until just recently. And that's the benefit. And we can keep working on those. We have timelines, obviously. But that's what I will commit that residents will have, where we already have, strong support, strong interest. We just want to build upon that and complete it and say, these are the pieces that we've put together. These are the commitments that we have from these internet service providers that you can look forward to. We have even, we have a lot of this data available from the work that we've done, and capturing that and putting it in a way that's easily or somewhat easily understood, that has enough time to come around it. So it's not just a look the week that you get your ballot and make a decision. It's let's be continually educated as we go forward on this. That's the commitment that I make, that it will be a well understood project from beginning to end together.
Amen. All right.
I got just a couple quick ones.
Of course.
I'd like to suggest, I've heard pray tell that it's proposed to be on the June ballot of next year. And as we all know, those usually aren't the most well-attended ballots. I think it ought to be on the November general election ballot, just because that's the one more people, we can statistically prove that primaries just don't bring out as many people. To the comment about, fiber being obsolete, I'm not going to belabor that. I don't think fiber is ever going to become obsolete. I just think that functionally and economically, to rip it to every house and every computer could potentially become obsolete when other mediums and vehicles come online technology-wise. I personally don't need to travel the internet with a space shuttle speed. Going through the internet at 80 gig or 60 gig, whatever is at my house right now. I can download a full season of whatever like that. I'm like, whoa, it's here. I can't. My brain can't even think that fast. So how fast do we really need to go? Is there a point in time where it's going to be the law of diminishing returns? And yeah, I get it. All of you who are super pro fiber, I get it. I'm not judging you for liking that. That's your right. But for the collective body, is there a vehicle that will satisfy even above average means and needs that's coming technology-wise we're on the cusp of? I don't think we need, I don't know why anybody needs these super ridiculous speeds. I get it if you're doing massive amounts of data, but that gets into some business needs that perhaps the populace isn't really responsible for. So I'm just saying, I think to every home could potentially become functionally and economically obsolete. I will say this too in closing, that we had, I want to maintain some anonymity here for the individual who sent us this letter. Suffice it to say, there's a CFO of one of the largest cities on the Wasatch Front who somebody very close to him sent us a letter. And she encouraged all of us to reach out to him and ask him how Provo Fiber went. I get it. There's differences. Okay, I understand that. But on the whole, fiber has been very messy for any city that has ever entered into it. And she encouraged us, and one of the points I want to point out is that she pointed out very strictly that her relative has said very strictly, hey, if you do this, you end up with small ISPs. He says the biggest struggle we had, one of the biggest struggles, aside from the financial struggles in our city, was that the small ISPs kept going bankrupt. Okay, so it's well understood that the incumbent providers, the behemoths in this country, they're not going to run on this fiber that you guys want to build. So let's just hope that we have good ISPs, smaller individual mom and pop ISPs that want us to build those because they need networks to run on. Let's hope that you get to choose from good ones if this project goes forward, and let's hope they're solid, because that was the biggest concern. I'm sure everybody knows what city I'm talking about. I'm not going to name it, though. That was one of the big concerns. She said, hey, they kept going bankrupt. They kept running out of business, couldn't sustain themselves. People had to keep switching ISPs. So enough said out of me on this.
Councilmember Barber.
In closing, I would go back to something I said in council months and months ago that was a part of a learning process for me that I'm willing to help everyone come around to, is this project is about much more than speed. It's not just about how fast I can download something or even upload at my home. And that is, I think I've been really open about something that I focus on from the very beginning and learned. This project is about much, much more than that. It's about opening up availability of services, it's about opening up competition, and it's about keeping money that we're all already spending here locally and benefiting our state, our city, our community right here. That's much bigger than how fast I can download something. Second, to go on that point about keeping things local, I think the best thing we have for this project are those smaller internet service providers that are going to be working on this network. And luckily for us, we are not in the same state that that city that was previously mentioned is. For one,
Yes, we are. It's Provo.
we're not in the same position. Sorry, I didn't mean state of Utah. We are in the same state. We are not in the same position. Thank you for that clarification. We're not in the same process. That was years ago, and we've come a long way since then, and we're going about it a different way, and I'll briefly explain why I mean about that. The internet service providers that we already have strong interest from are established. They have fantastic reputations. One of them is a $200 million company that started in Utah and is known as the best customer service out there. I'm pretty excited to have them available. I'm excited to keep my money going to them and rewarding our state and locally and rewarding fantastic customer service. That's great. And they're not a mom and pop, but they may have started that way. And luckily we're not on the very edge of their beginning. We're taking them at an established spot where they're in our neighboring cities a couple miles away, already established, already providing great service, already doing a great thing. And the other part that we're in a different position, not different state, thank you, different position, is we'll have multiple providers. That city that we talked about before was one provider that was brand new and could do it for the very cheapest possible, which sounds really great until they can't deliver. That will not be our case. We'll have multiple established providers that we already know about. We can already go look at their track record. That's another great thing. And the utility model takes away a huge part of that risk that other cities have failed by. And there are lots of success stories around the country that have done this and that we're learning from. And the statistics we're seeing up on the board are just the beginning telling of how much information we're going to have in this project before we spend a dime on construction. We will know how much it's going to cost, how many people will have participating, and that we're doing this in the best, most economical way possible. Because my commitment to residents and businesses is this is a benefit to your home. This is something that you'll look and say, I'm glad that we're looking forward to the future because it's benefiting me now, especially into the future. And I'm excited to see this project continue on.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion at this time to advance the repeal of the fiber utility to an action item.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Garn, seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Any comments?
Yes, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Would that include the agreements with Light Hub then, repealing them as well?
That would be another, we will do that separately, yes. Okay, so, but right now we're talking about just repealing the fiber utility. All right? Okay, any other comments? Let's vote. Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. I would entertain a motion to, now with Light Hub, there are a couple of different ways that we could sideline this. I don't think it's ready to, we don't have, Shane, do you want to explain?
There's also just a lawsuit pending, too, that we need to address. So we hope to address that in the next couple of weeks, and so it'd be my recommendation that you make some kind of a motion to set aside Light Hub until June, but we don't know what that looks like exactly today.
All right, so maybe we could ask for, what's it called, no?
Charades?
Okay, like a resolution.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for. A resolution to set aside Light Hub until after a vote can be held by the people.
I would only support that if it's clear to the people on the ballot that Light Hub is, being looked at. I don't want to just get a, do you want fiber or not on the ballot? We need to be very clear. I want it on the record here that whatever this ballot wording is, it's got to be, both sides of the coin have to agree to the ballot wording. This can't be a slanted. It's very feasible, and many people. It's obvious that a lot of the surveys have been slanted in the last year to the people.
Okay.
So, but anyway, I'm just saying, like we need to make sure though that wording. And if you're considering just doing a resolution to put Light Hub off, and then consider after you get people back, after the votes come in, let's say they come in successful, and you just go forward with Light Hub, people might say, well, no, I don't want to do that. I want to keep it all right here in case we want you to run it. So be clear about that.
Okay, yes.
Don't make the same mistake you made in July.
Councilmember Barber.
As I stated earlier, our commitment, my commitment specifically, as I will be here, is to put the whole package together on the ballot, and that includes the interlocal, and it also includes my commitment to work with those who have concerns with it to make it something that will work for our city. We have time to do that. We've extended the invitation, and this is the time to make it the right thing. And yes, absolutely, just going back to what I previously said, that is all part of the project together that will be voted on.
Cool. Will this sever all current relationships, though, for now? Like, everybody we're paying on this project and all that kind of stuff?
Well,
Meeting consultants,
we have, there's a lawsuit. So, Shane?
lawsuit to do with fiber?
This action won't do any of that. It won't sever anything. Severing relationships will be a completely different action taken probably by staff, not even by the city council, which is who hired those folks.
All right, so what we're saying for this, since there's some things that we need to work out with Light Hub, the commitment is to set it aside.
So Light Hub suing us?
No, no.
What's the lawsuit?
The actions taken on Light Hub to create Light Hub and in the service agreement were Mr. Mills denied the appeal for referendum on those two items to the petitioners, and the petitioners then submitted a lawsuit saying that your interpretation of those being administrative items was incorrect. So we're going through that process still.
Oh, okay.
So we will get into
Right, so we don't...
I've heard of those things. I just thought you were talking about something else to do with Light Hub.
This may be a naive question, but if you repeal the action, and of course that's why I'm not an attorney, but it seems like it goes away. The question of whether it's an administrative action or you can refer it or not seems to go away when the action goes
That's one of the options, but there's still other, when we've already entered into with negotiations and we've discussed this with attorneys, so there are rules in motion that would preclude us from saying, let's do just that. Okay. That's an option, but there are other options as well.
And
okay.
Councilmember Barber.
And this is a motion to be addressed as an action item next meeting.
We're not doing anything but
putting it on there, and which I think is the right thing to do. So we've discussed it, we've brought it out. We'll have more details and decide.
I'll be a resolution.
I'll be a resolution. It'll be part of the packet. It'll be very clear. So that I feel comfortable just with the direction right now.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion for a resolution to set aside Light Hub interlocal agreement and to place that on the agenda, the action agenda, the next council meeting on the 21st.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Barber and seconded by Councilmember Garn. Let's go to a vote on that. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
Aye. So can I ask a clarifier?
Yes.
So we're going to be setting this aside until our next council meeting, and at that point, we may vote to completely sever it.
Yes.
Well, okay.
We might. Yeah, it is one of the options.
Next council meeting is the action item.
Yes, it's the 21st. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll know by then
Right.
if we're to indefinitely sever it. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 5-0. All right. Is there anything else that we need to take on? Do we want to do the service agreement as well?
If you want to, but I think if you address Lighthouse, you address the service
Okay.
agreement.
I would just make sure it's clear in the packet
It will
that
be.
it's both things.
Either that'll be one resolution or two, but we'll just do whatever legal tells
Okay.
us to do as far as that goes.
All right. Okay.
You can make a motion.
Councilmember Adams.
I'll make a motion that we do the same with the service agreement as we've just done with Light Hub.
Second.
Okay, and it's been moved by Councilmember Adams, seconded by Councilmember Barber. Go to a vote. Councilmember DeCare.
Oh, sorry. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Okay. And there we have it. Are we good? Yeah. All right, let's move on. We're going to go to a call to the public, 3-minute limit. Thank you. All right. Eric Gibbons, please.
My name is Eric Gibbons. I live just off of 600 North, just west of the cemetery. My wife and I are both long-life residents of Kaysville, other than the several years we spent in the Bay Area doing graduate school. I came to speak to you about two issues, the fiber issue and then the general plan changes. In terms of the fiber, my family is in full support of the city's plans to implement a municipal fiber network and applaud the council for taking up such an ambitious plan. I want to thank the members of the Technical Advisory Committee and the actions of the council so far in favor of the fiber network. We look forward to voting for the network and the upcoming initiative. In terms of the general plan changes, we are also in full support of planning for the future. When we were living in Palo Alto, California, that community was sandwiched between the Santa Cruz Mountains to the west and the San Francisco Bay to the east. Given that area was built out in the 50s and 60s, there was no more room for new construction, and consequently, that community is currently in an intractable housing crisis. This is likely our future here in Kaysville. We are also sandwiched between a body of water to the west and mountains to the east. Our historical farmland is being planted with subdivisions and housing developments. While when we do run out of land, supply and demand suggest that housing costs will really spike, just like they did in the Bay Area. Moving to higher density housing model makes sense. It seems we can't afford to be building strictly on half-acre lots, especially when the population growth estimates that universally suggest that the population in the Wasatch Front is going to accelerate over the next 30 years. On the east side, a quarter-acre lots have worked fine. I don't know why it wouldn't work west of I-15. When people grow up in Kaysville, they tend to want to return to Kaysville to live by family in this community. That was certainly true of my wife and me. I would imagine a lot of people in this room are multi-generational Kaysville residents. It is a nice place to it's a nice place to live, and I get it. But and it's been said many times tonight, where are our kids going to live? I know this represents a change in our community, and change can be uncomfortable. But we need to face the realities of demographic changes along the Wasatch Front. It seems like the underlying discussion I know there is considerable concern that adopting the recommended changes would lead to a change in the field community forever. And while that may be true, the population is changing, and the community is going to change regardless of whether or not these plans are adopted. At the end of the day, if we're going to be serious about making sure our community is affordable for future generations, we will need denser housing. Sitting here tonight seems like we are currently looking for the easiest path and effectively kicking the proverbial can down the road. Do we honestly think this is going to solve these problems? Unfortunately, this is a difficult problem, and difficult problems will require difficult solutions. And I hope the council will appropriately address these problems going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting at this time.
So moved.
All right. It's been moved by Councilmember Garn, seconded by Councilmember Page. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Spencer Luke, please.
While he's coming up, can I quickly just ask something, Mayor, not of him, but he said, we look forward to voting on fiber in the upcoming initiative. Did people know about the decision that was going to be made tonight, before tonight?
No, I changed my response.
Yeah. He's had 3 hours to work on it.
Well, the vote came minutes before you came up here.
All right.
That's some quick typing.
It's not that part of laptop, so.
Hey, it's great.
Spencer Luke, come on up. Thank you so much. Sorry to keep you waiting.
You're fine. I'm thanking Nephi for giving me his time. He was the one that actually did that. I'm not trying to be necessarily disrespectful, but I apologize. I totally disagree with everything he just said. So to try and kind of make things go quicker. Part of my question is affordable housing. I understand that. My question is we keep approving all of these subdivisions that are supposed to be affordable, but yet I see the pricing on most of these houses being $400,000+. At what point does it become affordable then? We're subdividing it, we're allowing developers just to put more on, but the price is not any different. I don't see any difference. The main reason I came, though, thank you, Councilmember Adams, I came to ask how many of you from that email called Provo? One?
I'll say that I didn't because I didn't need to. I probably, yeah, it goes up.
That's, I've already been in communication with Councilmember Adams in regards to the letter, so I should have clarified that. I apologize, but it's very disheartening. They did exactly what we're trying to do. It's a $40 million fiasco. Google Fiber came in and saved them. I understand what we're trying to do. They also ripped up and replaced everything Provo had put down. Google, by the way, I know the person that got Google Fiber. I know exactly who it is. And he even has said in that letter, they're not going down this road, so why are we as a municipality deciding that we should be doing fiber if Google, I apologize, multi-billion-dollar company is saying it's not cost feasible and it's actually not even the future of technology. Originally, I wasn't opposed to fiber until I read that letter. I read the letter you have. I know exactly what it says. Okay? I'm totally opposed to fiber now because at this point I don't see the feasibility of that. 5G is coming out, whether or not that works, but I would like to have a commitment from you guys. If you're putting the package together, are you willing to call Provo and ask them?
You don't need to answer that. You don't.
I know I'm doing different. I apologize, but that's the main reason I came today. I listened online. By the way, I'd sure like to get that changed to only 5 people, and if we're listening on the internet, we can't talk. And I talked to you about that when you first came on, that there's no transparency if we have to sign up here. I'm coming from work. I have blood on my shirt from patients that I treat, and I still haven't had a dang thing to eat all day. Okay? So it's frustrating, transparency. So I'm going to, bypass. I'd like to know, are you planning on calling Provo and talking to people that have gone through this and it was a $40 million fiasco? Are you planning on asking them their opinion?
Yes. That's, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Kim Bell, please.
Appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. I agree that the general plan amendment is a big deal, and I appreciate the motion by Councilman Adams and DeCare to table it, and thank you for voting on that. I asked myself, and I want to ask you, why do we have a general plan? It seems like we put these general plans together, and then we modify them, and we modify them, and we modify them, and West Kaysville becomes these quarter acres. And I know we need to make room for more housing and affordable housing. I understand that. But zoning exists for a reason, to protect certain areas. So to keep those 1 acre lots, we need to, and that's why they purchased that 1 acre lot, because they wanted that 1 acre lot. And I understand that you want your kids to live near you, you want your in-laws to live near you because they're aging or whatever. However, you might have to move to the zoning that allows that. So I'm glad that it was tabled, because I do think we need to slow down. We're not kicking the can down the road. We're walking carefully to make sure we make those right decisions. So thank you. However, there's been some comments that were made that they had the public outreach, but there wasn't much response. How many of you in the room, raise of hands, knew about the open houses? Not too many. Maybe that's why there wasn't much response. I want to thank Councilman Adams for informing me of what was happening tonight. Maybe I'm the citizen that is just unaware, but I don't think I'm the only one out there, as we've seen with the raise of hands. So future public meetings and hearings, how do we get that word out? You did it very well with the fiber, in knocking doors, mailers, but we don't always get that. I was unaware of this zoning amendment or general plan change. And it's shocking and frustrating that we have a deadline date of December and we're just hearing about this. Why can't we have more heads up? I also understand that we do need to have ADUs, but we need to be very careful about ADUs. We need to limit short-term rentals like Airbnb, because that just increases the rental prices. That makes it unaffordable for our citizens. So we've got to very carefully look at this general plan. And thank you for tabling that.
Thank you. Thanks. Randy Van Bozy.
We'll see if that'll let me read it. Randy Van Bozy. I would love to talk to fiber, but quite honestly, and I am in favor of it, and I will support the initiative going forward, and I will knock doors, and I will call, and I will donate money to the effort, and I am grateful for that. But I don't think it's an issue that's going to make or break our city, quite honestly. I think that the housing is. I think that this is a vitally important decision that is being discussed. And so I'm going to focus on that for a minute. The reason I feel that way is because we are an amazing community with a lot of amazing people who have not opened themselves up to amazing opportunities within our community. We have closed the doors on who we are going to allow in. Back in the 1950s, there was practices called redlining, where it was desirable neighborhoods that were given mortgages, and it created a problem where people could not get into neighborhoods because the mortgages weren't available. In 1968, we had the Fair Housing Act that repealed that. It made it so that you cannot create a right and a wrong side of the tracks. But in Kaysville, we have done it for a decade or two now, and it is not okay. It is not okay that as a city we have said this side of the town is the side where multi-million-dollar houses get to be, and the other side is where all of our affordable housing is going to be. It's not okay that we do that. And I think that the discussion about housing, where we're watering it down to, well, we've already got this in place and we've already got that in place, so let's do it the easiest way we can possible, is not the right direction. And I hope that that won't be the direction we go, because we are good people here and we have the opportunity to do more. I do want to caveat that with saying that I do think that there needs to be things put into place. You know, somebody mentioned like lower taxes for some of these things. No, like I absolutely disagree with that. I think that if there are higher densities coming in, they may need to have more impact fees assessed because of that digging up of roads or whatever else may need to accommodate for it. We need to be aware of that. But we do need to have more emergency services on this side of town. I think those are all things that the council is aware of, but that kind of goes back to the point that Ms. Van Roy made at the beginning of the meeting, that we have to trust government. That is what makes us what we are, is that we elect people to represent us, and we have committees that help us in the process, and we vet this out, and then there comes a point where we have to trust it, and that's where voting becomes so important. And I mean, it's superfluous, but I hope that the city will realize that this may be scary to look this direction, but if you trust your community and if you put faith in that vote and you continue voting, you will always have control of what that will look like to take the right path. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ben Lever.
Mayor and Council, thanks for your time tonight, especially letting us have some extra time to talk. I didn't really plan on commenting on the zoning tonight, but I thought I would just take a minute as a resident of the east side of the city to advocate or give my thoughts that I would hope that as we move forward and talk about the future of the city and the developable land that we have on the west side, that we have a honest, open discussion and an engaged discussion with citizens and how we can move forward to provide not only a station but also staffing for an emergency response station on the west side of the city. Now I guess on the topic of the night and the year, fiber, I know there's been a lot of changes. I have one suggestion before I kind of move on to my prepared comments I had before the rest of the meeting, and I hope they still make sense. But I'd suggest that I would hope that there's some official involvement from some clearly identifiable dissenting voices as this moves forward in the official discussion. And I say that not so that those voices can scuttle the project or derail it, but one, to engender trust amongst people that have a lot of concerns about the project moving forward, and two, to play a devil's advocate in such a way that any problems or concerns that might be missed would be vetted. So now to my kind of prepared comments. I wanted to, tonight, the reason I came and got on the list was I wanted to say, recognize the time that has been given by the council members, the technical advisory committee members, numerous pro-fiber people. Mr. Willoughby today talked about the time and effort that they put in going door to door to raise the awareness about this project. And amongst those other people, the dozens of people, many of who are elderly or had children in tow, that spend hours and hours procuring thousands of signatures for the referendum. These people did this because they care. They care about the cause that they're representing. They cared about their families. They care about their neighbors. They care about the city. Most importantly and germane, I think, to this topic is these people care about this community. All of them. And I'm grateful in particular tonight for the large amount of time, and several hours, in fact, given to concerned and dissenting voices over the last few weeks, including my own, by council members and members of the Technical Advisory Committee, in an attempt to find some common ground from which we can move forward. I'm hopeful that there will be ongoing, fruitful conversations which will produce an equitable solution on the question of the fiber optic network. One last thing, and know that I prepared these comments before the meeting. I think one of the problems in today's world and on social media is an escalating emotion directed towards a computer screen or a public office or an idea, but almost always felt by an action. Can I have a couple minutes more? Seconds. One of the problems is an escalating emotion directed towards a computer screen or at a public office or an idea, but almost always felt at the other end by an actual individual. Another problem is we so often never hear an apology. And in that vein, I will lift where I stand. I do not apologize for my views on the role of government, or specifically on the city's role in telecommunications. I would, however, like to apologize to my fellow citizens, whether for or against fiber, or anywhere in between, to the Technical Advisory Committee, to the council, to the mayor, for anything that I personally might have said in one of these meetings or on social media that fanned the flames of anger or escalated the division in our community. I'm sorry. While the matter of fiber has been one of the most deeply emotional matters I've seen in this city, I'm hopeful that all parties I mentioned initially can come together and find a solution that recognizes and addresses all the concerns of all people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right. We'll move on to reports. Do we have any reports necessary tonight? No? Okay, let's move on. City manager report, anything?
No.
Okay. Do we need a closed session?
No, we don't.
Okay, all right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye. We do have an architectural review committee meeting. It could be very, very quick.
We will have a 10-minute break.
Oh, no, let's just get out of here.
Get it over with? Okay, push it over the edge. Let's do it. Okay.
Like a Band-Aid?
I would call the Architectural Review Committee. We're going to push through. We're going to push through. Here we go. All right. Architectural Review Committee is now in session. Lyle.
I'm just looking to see, so the property owner was working through some flights, and I don't know if he's able to be here. He may have been here and had to leave early, so I'll try and cover generally what's being proposed. You'll possibly remember in the business park along Cage Drive, just south of Ben Jensen over your Camping World. Not too long ago, the council approved, and the committee approved temporary use of the site for a used car lot. And so that user, GP Motors, is now ready to move forward with what they're expected and the actual permanent build. And so we're proposing it's the same use for that user. They would pave the back half of the lot where the cars are located, build a new building. It's about 14,000 total square feet, roughly 7,000 square feet per floor. This is, again, where it looks like. You can see floor plans if you care to get into the weeds on that. Some space for cars for the cells, general office space. So this is a little different than a lot of our business park that's flex. These are more office-specific users. The architecture that you can see here is under your consideration if that's something that's acceptable for the business park. In short, the staff's findings are that the site plan is proposed, all the minimum requirements, height, setbacks, amount of parking, so forth, are all in compliance with what's required, both within our ordinances and at least the minimum standards of the covenants for the business park. The rest is simply subjective in your mind if that use is still appropriate and if the architecture is appropriate for the site. We would recommend that you approve the project as is presented.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion at this time.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Board Member Page and seconded by Board Member DeCare. Any comments?
Is this the car lot that is out there now?
Yes, this is the existing lot.
Now,
That's correct.
Okay.
So I'm still going to ask you some questions about this. Is this congruent with what we're voting on here? Okay. Oh, okay, I got you.
Okay.
Long night.
All right. Board members
in a hurry, but I would just say that what a huge improvement. I mean, it looks very nice, and compared to what it's like now, with just the dirt everywhere, and the cars, great business, and it's good that they're moving forward. So
it's a used car lot?
Yes, it's a used car lot. I don't know exactly the model, but I recall him touting in recent conversations that it's a little different than kind of the open car lot model where people come and just browse the vehicles, look online, find something they like, and then come to the business to look at that specific vehicle.
They'll keep their inventory here.
They'll still store on the east end of the property by the train tracks the inventory.
It's not a company with a vending machine, though, huh? Where it's like a car.
I've seen those, the car vending machine. Not one of those, unfortunately.
Yeah.
At least I've seen pictures.
Historically, have we ever had any preclusions for used car lots in the business district, though?
I don't know.
Allow people to store, like, a mini excavator behind their building, and here we have a fleet of used cars.
Yeah. The best example that I'm familiar with, and we've had two somewhat recently, but is Camping World that sells RVs and trailers, and so it's a similar type of inventory. We did approve a user that was going to do power sports items that didn't come to fruition at one point out of the KSG building. I'm not personally familiar with if other car lots have been proposed within the business park and whether or not they were approved and didn't come about.
Completely fits the ordinances of the business park.
Yeah, the business park has some items that are specifically prohibited, and they tend to be heavy industrial type users, crematoriums, I forget all of them, but the use itself is certainly allowed within the park.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 5-0. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Just do the minimum, let the members
This is just saying that going to refinance. Oh, that it was noted.